think it is one of those elements that we're so far behind in our housing numbers, and there's, you know, I don't think anybody would call it anything other than crisis. That possibly employment suffers from being a secondary element in it. So the presumption is always in favour of in planning terms, of actually being granted planning permission for residential. Employment doesn't have the same level of presumption. So we get to a stage where I think if we can develop things like garden cities and actually do large scale development where you can create that infrastructure and that join it together, that's brilliant. And we've got all of the Northern Powerhouse, the Midlands Engine and ARC, and if they can actually bring that combined and strategic thinking, then we can bring those things back together. But the National Planning Policy Framework, I would suggest, hasn't gone as far as it could do.
So what elements would you like to see that would further that?
Oh, big question. I need to have the National Planning Framework in it. I think it's subtle changes. The planning to a lot of people out there is seen as actually a hurdle, but actually it's a mechanism and a tool to actually deliver sustainable development in the future. So anything we do needs to be actually based on that sustainable approach for communities. So not just that it lasts 100 years, but actually how do those things work? And I think to change it much more, you end up creating barriers to say you can't do this, and it becomes very imperialistic in terms of you have to hit these standards to get it. So maybe the thing to do is actually open up for greater flexibility, to put employment and along with residential together, so the two things come together as an application, that has that presumption in favour as well.
And Phil Graham at our last forum talked about joined up infrastructure and housing. As a planner, do you think we're getting things right in that area?
We're definitely trying. I think I'd actually go further and say if you look at the UK, we're leading the way in terms of actually how that joined up thinking actually and a lot of competing interests come together. I think in Europe you've got fantastic regeneration projects that show that, but in the UK we have a lot of land ownership issues. So maybe the next stage is to actually bring CPO back into where it was 15, well maybe 20 years ago now. I'm a lot older than I remembered.
And I know that it is a big housing crisis and perhaps the biggest housing regeneration since the Second World War. And there is talk about villages, towns, cities linking up. Are you worried about that, Gerald, that the whole small island would just become a housing estate?
Am I worried? Worry's probably not the right word. As a town planner, you kind of accept that this is part of growth, where people are sitting in houses and they don't want the field next to them developed. Originally, they were sitting in a field, and we look at cities, how they grow. For me, it's how do we reuse land in the most beneficial way. And I think where we don't see opportunity, there'll be opportunity in the future. So I don't want to see a metropolis, but if the population continues to grow, we have to actually genuinely find space for them. But we're nowhere near that. I think 70% of the country is still green at the minute.